Hey everybody, welcome to Leading Thriving Cities, where we shine a spotlight on leadership and public service and have deep conversations about how to create a sustainable future for our cities. Today's guest is Sara Costlow. She's the Assistant City Manager of Deer Park, Texas. We really get into what it looks like to be a leader as a woman in public service and the specific challenges you have to wrestle through as you climb those ranks within a city. She really gets into what it means to show up and serve with heart, to show up and serve in a way that makes a true difference. I cannot wait for you to see this conversation. All right, Sara, thank you for being on Leading Thriving Cities. We always jump in with the first question. So you're the Assistant City Manager in Deer Park, Texas, which is part of the greater Houston area. And y'all are kind of on the southern end of Houston? I'm trying to remember from when I was there.
Southeast part.
Okay, southeast part of Houston. Okay, about how big's the city?
About 35,000.
35,000, okay. And you've been there about three and a half years, you said? Okay.
Yeah, almost 3 years.
So being Assistant City Manager, I know you came through the finance department to get to kind of that role.
I did, yeah.
What's one thing you wish people understood about being an assistant city manager and city management in general?
My job is a lot of fun.
Okay.
And even still, I wish more people knew that. But even still, there are days where, just like any other job, sometimes it's not so fun.
Sometimes there's spreadsheets, right?
Yeah, I miss the spreadsheet.
Of course you do. The person who comes for finance would like to look at more spreadsheets.
City management had more spreadsheets.
That's really funny.
But yeah, if there was probably one single thing that I wish more people knew, it's that you truly have to have a servant's heart to be able to get up every day and do what we do, and not lose that passion. Because there are days where we have really rewarding things, like we're recognizing, all-star sports teams, or we're memorializing something in the park. And then we've got days where we have customers screaming at us that their water bill went up $3 and they don't understand why. And so there's really highs and there's really lows. And I wish there was more awareness and understanding that we truly have to care about what we're doing, or we are not successful in this field at all.
That's a recipe for burnout if you don't care, if there's no deeper reason besides the paycheck.
Yeah, absolutely.
Spoiler
alert, no one does city
No one does this for the paycheck.
Yeah.
Well, you hit on something very interesting there in the very beginning. You said this job is fun.
It can be.
And I think it's interesting. I don't know that a lot of people, you're right, no, they don't think about government and think fun.
No, they don't.
But what is it that makes it fun?
Just in general, I think, society-wise, there is a really negative connotation about government. The big bad government, and we're out to get you. And it doesn't matter if we're talking about at the federal level or at our level when you're talking about, a municipality. But there are still so many things that make our job worthwhile and fun. When we get to sit at council meetings and cheer on a 4U baseball team, or come up and recognize them and have each of them, give them a moment for all of them to feel special and recognize what they're doing, and find ways to shine or let our community shine, and let them know that we value them and appreciate them. Those types of things are fun. Or collaborating with local businesses or local artists to paint, murals down your main street, whatever that may be in your town. Those types of things are fun. Partnering with the school districts and industry, and going to events and sort of speaking on behalf of what makes our city special, or why we're so fortunate that you're here and partnering with us, or whatever the case may be. There's a lot of fun things about it, where we kind of get to step out of the administrative part and we get to put a different hat on and actually be out in the community with people. And it's one thing to do what we do and sit behind our desks to get that done, but it's another thing when we're out there with the community and we're walking it and we're living it and we're experiencing things with them. So we have a much better understanding of what they're talking about, and what the things that they want, or the things that will make them thrive, or the community better for them. And so those types of things are...
The community side is a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Do you find fun on the administrative side, on the never-ending mountain of problems side?
Sometimes.
Okay.
Sometimes I do. So there's... So you were correct. You said earlier that I came from a finance background, and that's absolutely true. For the majority of my career, actually, before I got into government, was spent in the private sector. I'm an accountant by trade. And then
at heart?
I always say Excel is the sixth love language, and it is how I
do not have that love language.
It is it's my passion, one of many. But when I finally did decide to make that leap, and I transitioned from the finance world to city management, I actually had a lot of heartburn and anxiety about not coming to work and knowing, okay, this time of year, I know I've got budget, and I know we've got to set the tax rate, and I know I've got to do these calculations by this day, and we're going to issue debt, and we've got to do X, Y, Z, and every day I've got a checklist, and my job is there's things that come up, and you have to make allowances for that, but by far, you typically have a very stated, you know what's in your purview and what you got to accomplish. I kind of do enjoy that part of city management that you mentioned, because when I first moved over, I had a lot of anxiety that my days are going to be different.
There's less structure, right?
And I come to work today, and I may not have a checklist. I may have had one, last week, because I knew we've got council in 2 days, and I need to do this, and I need to do this. But sometimes, we find ourselves at work, and it's just whatever the day throws at us that day. Yes. And there is a lot that can be stressful, but there's a lot of joy in that too. It's very invigorating. And absolutely prevents you from being bored. That's
interesting that I don't think any of our guests have ever talked about before. That transition from director to ACM, it is a lot less structured, isn't it? It's like there is some structure to it, but there's still a lot of, my job is to deal with really complex things, and who knows when they're going to pop up or where they're going to come from. And so it's leaving space for that, because they inevitably do. Like it's funny how you say, well, I don't have a task list for the day. There's no day where you're sitting around with your feet up going,
no,
waiting for problems. Like, it is a stack of problems.
Yeah, literally. It's so funny you say that. Just the other day, we had a call from a team member of ours. Me and my city manager did, and she had one other issue to tell us about for the day, and I immediately just said, this is the 7th issue for the day, but lay it on me. It's 2 p.m.
Sure.
What do we have?
Let's take one more.
And some days are like that, but then some days it's walking around and visiting municipal court, or impromptuly it's chocolate chip cookie day, so we're going to go get chocolate chip cookies, and we're going to deliver them to every building in the city. And there's a healthy handful of stuff like that. But on the other side, every day being a new day has actually been really fun, and I've enjoyed it.
That's interesting, especially for a person who likes structure so much. I'm curious about complementary strengths. So you're the only ACM, right?
I am.
Okay. So I'm curious about your strengths. If spreadsheets are one of your love languages, I'm curious how that complements Jay. Jay Stokes is your city manager.
He is.
Are spreadsheets one of his love languages? No. He's the opposite, isn't he?
He's the opposite.
Yeah, I figured that.
I'll give Jay a shameless plug. He's the city manager of Deer Park, like you said. He's one of the past presidents of TCMA. He's very well respected and well known.
I think it's fair to say well loved.
Oh,
like everybody loves Jay. Yeah.
I mean, if anyone knows any tiny little bit of detail about Jay, it's that he absolutely loves karaoke and does not shy away from any opportunity to engage in that activity. And so, by far, there's a lot of reasons that can make your job fun or make your job just a really horrible place for you to be. And we see all the time on social media and LinkedIn and similar avenues that people don't leave bad jobs, they leave bad bosses, right?
Yes, yeah.
And so there is a caveat to city management and what we do in that if you're not in the right place, or you don't have a harmonious council, or you don't have a team that you work well with and y'all strengths balance each other, it makes it a lot less fun. Jay is the opposite of that. Jay is easily half of why my job is so fun. But no, he is not a spreadsheet guy, and there are definitely days where he'll be painstakingly working his way through something, and I'm just itching to do it for him. And sometimes he lets him and lets me, and sometimes he doesn't. Some days he says,
let me get my hands on those columns and rows.
Please let me do it. Some days he says, okay, teach me how to fish, instead of catching the fish for me. But sometimes he's like, no, I'm going to figure this out. But so in that regard, our strengths do play off each other really well. He's very laid back, easygoing. He's much more able to see the humor in things and kind of let everything roll off. And whereas I am by nature more structured, and I want tasks and finish lines, and I want things to accomplish, and I want metrics to show how we got there, and I want the spreadsheets, and that has, over the last about year, almost 2 years actually, that I've been in the current role with Jay, it's been extremely helpful for me from a professional and leadership standpoint, because I'm sort of mellowing out, if that's the case. I'm like, I guess, osmosis. I'm taking some of his
It's fair to say a lot
strengths.
of accountants need to mellow out a little bit.
And hopefully he's gained a couple from me.
I would imagine he has. Listen, all of my friends are the same kind of personality as Jay. They'll drive me insane because I'm hyper-structured, and they're running around having their best life, and I'm like, settle down just a little bit, okay? So I bring a little structure to their life that's helpful, and they force me to go do things I don't want to do. It's great. Karaoke would be an example of that.
For conferences or trips, I give one night.
I'm gonna make sure at TCMA next year I just avoid Jay in the evenings like the plague, because I don't do karaoke. Well, that's not me.
Yeah, we find
he's gonna watch this and be like, I have a mission next year.
I think you've sealed your fate. Yes, he will remember.
I'm really curious how that works as people are approaching the ACM role, because was your intention always to get into city management?
No.
Okay, so it's kind of a thing that happened. It wasn't something you went applied for and chased and were like applying at different places. I think that's something for people that are thinking about making that jump, is to not just find a place that will say yes to you, but find a place where your strengths really complement the city managers and are something that they're maybe not as strong in. Like my team around me, these folks are so good at things that I'm terrible at. And today they were working with a calendar, and they were talking about all these variables, and my head just hurt thinking about all the things they were wrestling with. But it was beautiful to watch them work, because I don't have to do it, because it's not my strength. And so I think having ACMs and city managers that really have those kind of complementary strengths is probably more important than we even think about.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I will absolutely own and admit that I was in a very fortunate place. I was hired into Deer Park as their finance director, and I've, of course, had a great feeling about the city and the people that you're going to work with, but unknowns are still scary. And so I was with a municipality prior to Deer Park. I left that to come to Deer Park, and that's very scary. Yeah. But then you get there, and you kind of get into your groove, and then you loosen up a little bit, and you realize, okay, this is an even better situation than I thought, and I really connect with these people, and I really like these people, and council's really harmonious, and I love the community, and I think I'm actually going to move here, which I did.
Nice.
And all of those things just kind of start falling into place. And so then when you have the type of opportunity where you are able to apply and promote up, and it's just kind of a seamless fit, I think that's a fate thing all day long. And I will very much acknowledge that not everybody has that type of opportunity.
Right.
But it's so important for those that do have the opportunity and the means and the resources to be very thoughtful and purposeful with your intention of where you're looking and who you're applying with, because the types of organizations that you go into and the people that you're working with, they will absolutely make or break your work experience. Yeah. And it's such a shame when we encounter people that had that passion and that drive to want to do.
They're just so burned out, there's nothing left.
Yeah. It's unfortunate to see.
That's the part of the reason I'm so excited about the work we're blessed to do in this industry, is because all of us are capable of really, really incredible, heroic things and pretty terrible things. And so going, okay, am I? Me too. And it's going, am I going to show up as healthy every day? Because if I don't, none of the folks that I'm leading are going to eventually, they're going to fade. They're eventually going to burn out. And it's on me to figure out how to do that and how to invest in myself and slow down and all the things that we wrestle with.
Yes.
So when you first, when my guess is it was Jay, when he has the first conversation with you and says, hey, you look like a great ACM. I think you'd be good at this. When he first has that conversation, what was your first reaction to that?
Actually, there were some moments of shock, like, no, you can't be. You're talking to me?
You start looking
talking
around.
to somebody behind me? But honestly, there was just as much interest on my part. So I was very fortunate. Again, when I got hired in to Deer Park, it was January of 22. And I was in that role for about 8 months when our 15-year tenured ACM announced his retirement.
Yeah. So that's the very definition of big shoes to fill,
yeah,
right?
And that man, I mean, he's a walking encyclopedia. He's incredibly brilliant. He knows... We used to joke and call our assistant attorney the assistant city attorney because the ACM was just so knowledgeable.
Knew so much,
Yes, on so many things.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I of course thought we're our own worst enemy, and I thought I've got no shot here. I've been finance director here for 8 months, but that's not going to stop me or slow me down because if I want something, no one's just going to hand it to me, right? So I actually remember having a conversation with Jay and saying, I know that this is probably a long shot, but I'm going to apply for this anyway.
Okay.
And so I did, and here we are. But I was very fortunate, even throughout all of that process, that, and this is one thing where it really highlights, I think, the importance of why having a public servant's heart is so important. Because even throughout all of that, I was very cognizant of the fact that Jay, again, is a well-loved guy. There are going to be people from all over the state that want to come work for Deer Park because they want to work with Jay every day.
Yeah.
And they are going to be way more experienced than I am and have different strengths and skill sets and backgrounds and so many other factors. And so even through all of that, while we're going through this process, I was very genuine and forthcoming with, even if I'm not the one that gets that job, what is it that you need from me? What do you want to know? What directors want out of a new ACM? Do you want to know, or can you tell me what you want your finance director to do to support this new ACM? Because whatever it is, I'm going to collectively with the team, we're going to step up and do that.
Whether you got it or not, it was a great learning experience either way, right?
Yeah, and I was fortunate that Jay took the. Yeah, I hope he doesn't say this now, but at the time he would say, I took the leap. And
you hope you've earned a little bit of cred since then?
Yeah.
Okay.
But on that note, that's why I actually try to do quite a bit of speaking and engagement with TCMA and groups that are affiliated with TCMA.
Yep.
There are assistance groups around the state. The one in my region is UMSET, the Urban Management Professionals of Southeast Texas, but there's UMACT, UMANT, UMass. Yeah, they're all.
You're literally just making all this up right now, aren't you?
Not.
You're just throwing out words.
I wish, but they're all management analyst team or groups for Central Texas, North Texas, South Texas, Southeast Texas, and they're all affiliate support groups of TCMA. And I have been my first actual seat on the board with TCMA was filling that assistance role, that representative role for the board.
Yeah.
And any chance I get to talk about why those groups are so important, I jump on it because not everybody has a linear path. Not everybody starts as an assistant to or as a management analyst or has their MPA or has CPM or any of those things. I started in the private sector. My degrees are in accounting and finance.
So did you go from private sector to finance director?
I did not.
Okay.
After, again, almost about 10 years just as an accountant, I was in a situation where I was just not in the right environment. My employer and I were not a good fit for each other, and I knew that I was very quickly approaching a season where I was going to burn out really fast, and I needed to find a change. Yeah. And at the time, I lived, the municipality that I lived in had an opening in their accounting department, and I went to go work there as a CIP accountant. And over time, when I left that municipality, I left as the accounting manager, and I was hired into Deer Park as their finance director.
Gotcha.
So that was my first director role. Yeah. And then 8 months later, I'm gunning for ACM.
That takes a measure of boldness, right? There's a little bit of heart and drive there, right?
No, for sure.
So are you naturally that way?
Yes,
okay.
I am. I've always had that type of, I'm going to say ambition and drive. Some people would probably say stupidity.
If we're honest,
and callousness.
For driven people, you have to be a little of all of it, right? Yeah, you really do.
There has to be things that keep us going day to day, but I have always very much.
So that part is naturally easy for you.
Yes.
What are things you've had to overcome on that climb that are not as easy for you?
Man, and I hope one day that Jay has the opportunity to come and be a guest here on your show, because he will 100% corroborate this. Jay is very outgoing and extroverted and never meets a stranger and can sit and have conversations with everybody. Networking is his favorite thing. Yeah. calls himself a raconteur. I think I'm pronouncing it correctly.
Yeah, you are.
He's a
Raconteur.
Professional storyteller.
Yeah.
That's what he wants to do when he retires.
It's just walk around and tell stories.
That is Jay's happy place.
The nice part is you can do that and just be the crazy person in town. You just walk around telling random stories.
And I am the exact opposite of that.
Interesting.
I am introverted.
Yeah.
To me, these types of things, and although I'm having a great time, these types of things take a lot of mental
It's draining,
work
isn't
for
it?
me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so
I'm an introvert too, so I fully understand.
At the end of a work day or at the end of a really long conference or whatever the case may be, how I decompress is by myself in my hotel room with not speaking to anyone and putting my phone's face down.
I noticed you said when you go to TCMA, you're like, I will give Jay one evening of karaoke and then I'm out.
Yeah.
Like
he gets
that's
one night.
you know what's really funny? My TCMA experiences last year. A lot of city managers there that we know and have worked with, and they were so kind because they know me. Yes. They know that I'm there to connect and to serve and to meet new people. And they also know I'm going to spend 99% of my time in my room by myself.
Yeah, that's how you rejuvenate.
And they refuse to let me do that. They're like, nope, here's an event. You're coming to it. You're going to be there. And it was so kind. Like, it meant the world to me. It was also the most exhausting experience of my life.
I completely understand. But that's definitely something in this profession and in my role that's hands down has been the most challenging thing I've had to overcome. Because there are, there's just times where it's unavoidable. And to say it that way, it almost sounds as if I'm speaking, I'm giving it a negative connotation, but I'm honestly not. There are times where what is appropriate and required of you is to be out in the community and having those relationships and making those connections and networking with those colleagues and speaking at these sessions and going to those after conference events so you can get to know people even more and develop your network. And
it's all good, but like everything, like too much of a good thing is still exhausting.
Yeah, it's mentally draining. But I can definitely see what that has done for me professionally and the progress that I've made and how that's helped me be successful now. Because if I were to look at my professional Sara, 10 years ago, it was night and day. My RBF would be really strong, which it's still pretty strong. My team members will probably tell you it's just naturally on my face. But there were days where predominantly back then I was not a people person. I wouldn't interact. I would not engage purposely in any way. Whereas now it's less of a have-to thing and more of a this is just part of who I am now. And it comes a lot more naturally than it used to. But that's definitely the biggest challenge I've had to overcome.
That is really interesting, and that makes a lot of sense. But it's interesting you talk about being on all these boards and being able to go speak and do all these things. Is that a lot of what has contributed to your career path as you've grown? Like,
I think now.
Okay.
When I was an accountant, those types of opportunities I just never had. I wasn't even in mid-level management at that time in my career, much less an executive. And so those types of scenarios just weren't in my purview. They didn't even exist. But since getting into government, and Deer Park specifically, I just can't say enough positive and wonderful things about Jay. The people, the opportunities that you have and the people that you work with can absolutely shape your career and who you are and your trajectory. And when I started as finance director, kind of knowing that I am naturally introverted and I'm going to stick to myself and do my own thing.
Spreadsheets don't ask questions,
do they? They don't. I mean, math is very black and white. There's rules. You get it right or wrong. It works or it doesn't. Excel and formulas are, you can always fall back on them and count on them. But when I was very new to Deer Park, Jay made it almost his mission. We've got a new director, and I'm going to introduce you to everybody. This is the Parks and Rec Board, and this is Planning and Zoning, and your Fire Board, your Crime Board, CDC. Come to this, Christmas party. Come to this dinner. Come to this. It's not required, but you're going to meet a lot of really good people. And he immediately just tried to drown me in a good way. He immersed me into the community, and before I knew it, I was so deeply connected and involved.
Yeah.
And then that turned into an interest in what Jay does and how else I could serve the community and what capacities maybe I could do that if it wasn't in finance. And that led to TCMA, which led to UMSET, which led to all these other things.
This is such an interesting line because I just spent some time. Rhett Parker is the city manager of Post, Texas. You know Rhett? I just spent some time with his team this last week. And one of the things they were talking about is he's been there, I think, 3 years now, 2.5, 3 years, maybe 3.5. And they were talking about when he came in, he immediately started pushing them. He's like, you need to be on boards, you need to be serving, you need to be out there. And they've done that. And it's interesting because what they said, what it is, it totally expanded their worldview.
Yeah.
Of going and experiencing new things and leading and serving in places they never even thought of before.
Yeah.
And it's funny how I think a city manager can have that much effect by just, I think I'm going to throw something out there. I have no science to back up. Please, no one ever hold me to this, but it's one of these things I do, right? I think the majority of people in government, in public service, are probably introverts. I think there is something attractive about the consistency of it. And so I think that attracts introverts because I think about the people I've had on the show and the people I've encountered and worked with, most of them are introverted. Yeah. And so to have a city manager say, hey, you need to be out there, you need to go out, serve, do good, have an impact, it grows our careers, right? It grows what we start to see something beyond just the spreadsheet. We see what's truly possible, beyond, and that becomes exciting. Yeah.
I'm going to put that on a shirt.
There's a world beyond spreadsheets. I like that.
That's fantastic. You should trademark it.
We're going to start selling those to every finance director.
They will sell. Go to GFOA. They'll sell like hotcakes.
But I think I having experienced that this week, and then hearing this from you, I think there's something for city managers in that. To say, are you challenging your people to get out there and continuing education, growing, learning, serving? I think there's something to that.
I can't disagree, and I will give Jay, at least as far as Deer Park is concerned, I will give Jay all the credit, and he does that with our directors too.
Yeah.
We had a couple years ago we started doing our leadership retreat. Earlier this year actually. It
was a lot of fun.
You hosted, it was fantastic, and we got a ton of good feedback from that. But we can talk about that.
No, let's talk more about what a good job I did.
Let's talk about it. But he makes the point to just make that type of engagement and interaction and fun part of our job.
Yeah.
We do these silliest, just craziest things. And it's just expected of us now, but in a good way. Yep. I mean, for our employee banquet this year, Jay's very theatrical.
I've noticed that.
He loves all the plays and karaoke and dressing up. He is in his happy place.
Yes.
And for our employee banquet earlier this year, he and I dressed as Wayne and Garth, and we filmed a whole Wayne's World skit.
Sure.
And the special guest that came on our show was our mayor.
Yeah.
And we had the wigs, and it was...
I think it's interesting.
It was phenomenal.
We started this whole conversation with the fact that working in government can be fun. And this is where we are. I think we see why that is. That is really interesting.
And so, but those types of things, it's just when people come to work for Deer Park or they come to work every day, they know that is the type of organization that we are.
It sounds like you're going to be challenged, but you're also going to have fun in the process.
Yes.
I love that.
Yeah.
Part of why I was so excited to have you on the show was to get your perspective because you're obviously a young woman in, a city manager's office, and that's not a place where there's a lot of young women. No. And so I'm genuinely curious about what you've encountered in that process.
This is going to be edited, right? No, I'm kidding. Totally
this is
teasing.
The good stuff here.
I know.
John's like, no, we're not editing this.
I signed those rights away. No, so I hate that it's even a relevant conversation this day and age, but it is, of course. It honestly is. There were just throughout, I could go so far back. Throughout my career in general, there have been setbacks just because I'm a woman or whatever, because of my age or my background, or now that I'm not an MPA or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
You always face those sort of biases, whether they're direct or indirect, purposeful or not purposeful. And back when I first, not at Deer Park, that disclaimer cannot be edited out of the video. When I first started in government, I actually had an elected official one time ask me, who was, if my husband was okay watching our children while I attended this council meeting. And I thought, that is,
wow,
we're here.
Yeah.
Okay. Those are the types of conversations. I'm glad you asked me that. We need to be talking more about these things.
Yes.
But now transitioning into the city manager's office, I'm certainly not going to lie. I'm going to definitely be honest and say that there was a period of time in the beginning where there was a lot of, well, did you see who got that job? And what qualifications does she have? She was a finance director. She has only been in government for a collective 5 years. She is in her early 30s. She is young and has blonde hair. The list went on and on and on.
Yeah.
And whenever I have this type of conversation or a conversation that's related to this topic, I like to think of my almost now 5-year-old daughter. One of the reasons that I keep being ambitious and being so loud is how I like to describe it. Making my voice
bold,
known.
But we'll take loud.
Is I like bold too. Is that I absolutely want to show her that it's okay to do whatever it is that she wants to do, and she just has to keep being loud. Bold. Just keep being bold.
You're going to regret the loud as she gets older. You're like, oh, please stop.
She's already plenty loud. You're right. I do regret it a little bit. But when I describe her, she's so strong-willed to the point that there's defiance and all kinds of other things wrapped up in her little 5-year-old brain. But the term I've started using for her is aggressively helpful. She is aggressively helpful.
Yeah.
And instead of saying bossy or anything like that, she is aggressively helpful. And I like to use that phrase or tell that story when I'm having these types of conversations because while some of it was fate and I happened to be at Deer Park already and, the stars aligned and the chips kind of fell where they may, a lot of things also just don't happen by accident. We work hard usually to get where we are.
Yeah.
And even though I did have to deal with all of those things, and don't get me wrong, they weren't, prolific. There weren't, there wasn't letters taped to my car or something of that nature. But very quickly, the proof is kind of in the pudding. And I kept showing up and being loud and being aggressively helpful and being bold. And it did not take long at all for people to start to, very fortunately, step beyond that stereotype or that knee-jerk reaction and start to form their own opinion and say, okay, maybe this is a good thing for the city. Maybe this was a good fit. Maybe Jay knew what he was doing. Maybe she actually does have things she can offer. Maybe my department being under her is going to be a good thing. And so it very quickly corrected itself. Yeah. But there was definitely a brief period of time where there was some of that scuttering? No?
Scuttering? Sure. It's a word now.
It's a word now.
It's a word now.
Filtering out throughout the
It'll go alongside aggressively helpful.
Yeah,
I like that.
That was horrible.
I like that. I'm curious, because you and I met through Texas Women's Leadership Institute through some work we got to do. That's my favorite day every year. So I get to spend a day with that class every year.
Fantastic.
It's the best.
I met you in January of 23 in Pflugerville.
Yeah. That's where we do it every time.
Yes.
And I think it's interesting the conversations that happen in those rooms. And I honestly, like, every time I'm in there, I'm like, I cannot believe we get to do this, because I, as a 6'2", middle-aged white man, get to sit and listen to women honestly open up about, here's the challenges we faced. And the stories I hear, I'm like, I wouldn't have survived that. I would have gone home crying. I wouldn't have fought. I wouldn't have been aggressively helpful. I would have been like, screw it, I'm out. And so I think I always like getting that perspective to help people truly understand. So I'm curious, from your perspective, if you had to talk to women who are thinking about getting into public service, what advice would you give them?
Keep being bold.
Keep being aggressively helpful, huh?
I mean, don't. It's really easy to have those. It is extremely, extremely easy to have those moments where someone says something to you that maybe we're human and we interpret things maybe correctly or incorrectly, or maybe the way someone did or didn't perceive or intend to say it, or however the case may be. And it's really easy to find ourselves kind of stuck and in this thought process of, well, I don't know if I can do this. What if they said this, and did they actually mean this, and are they right? And do I have any? I mean, I do have a young child, and I am going to have to be gone for doctor's appointments, and I am going to have to do all these things, and maybe I am a single mom, or maybe I am going through a divorce right now, or maybe I have my own obligations, whatever they may be, and I have to be out of the office a lot, or my child has special needs, and I'm always going to have to be gone for whatever the case may be. And is this the right thing for me? Am I able to do this? Are they going to think lesser of me? And it's really, really easy to let all of that
happening all at once.
Yeah, right? It's really easy to let all of that in and kind of consume us. And so the absolute best, I guess, piece of advice I could give is, one, find your tribe of people.
Yes, because you can't do it alone, can you?
No, you cannot. And regardless of what you're going through in life, if your tribe is genuinely your tribe, and they are with you for the right reasons, and they support you and want the best things for you that make you happy, they're going to be your tribe no matter what.
Yeah.
So find those people, lean on them, and then keep being aggressively helpful. Keep being bold, and it's okay to go home at the end of the day and have those moments where you break down or our feelings get hurt, because that's valid.
Yeah.
How we feel is absolutely valid, and it's okay to feel all of those feelings. But at the end of the day, if you're still sure that that's what you want to do, then have that moment, get it together, and show up the next day and keep being aggressively helpful. Keep being loud.
There's something to that, acknowledging the feelings, because the feelings may not be 100%. They are our view of truth, right? And so they're valid, but also we can't always make every decision based on them, because our feelings are going to tell us just shut down. This is not worth it, right? Because they're trying to keep us safe. But I love this idea. I'm hearing two things in what you're saying. There is this mixture of vulnerability and determination. And this is what we coin realistic optimism. Realistic optimism is, I'm terrified right now, but we're going to go figure it out. Yeah. Like, we're going to climb the mountain, And it is the vulnerability to say, I'm terrified. The vulnerability to say, hey, tribe, I need you. I don't have this. I need to lean on you. But then the determination to say, I'm going to be aggressively helpful. I am going to make sure I'm bold and I'm loud. And I think there's something else I heard in your story earlier is, you continue to show up. There's a consistency to it, right? Because I think the world is getting better. I think over time, very slowly, it's getting better. And I tell you what, last time with TWLI, some of the stories I heard, I was like, oh, it used to be horrible. Yeah. And now it's just not great. We're almost to good. We're getting there, But to hear the consistency required in just keep showing up, because ultimately, how opinions start to change is by getting to know people. That's how people start to get a new worldview. Yeah. And so I think there's something to that.
Make those connections. Build those relationships.
Exactly.
It's the vulnerability that makes us relatable. That's the vulnerability of our story.
Yes.
And truly being able to not just understand, but have conversations about emotion and logic, and where they each have their place, and where they come together, and where you eventually reach a point where you have to learn how to manage them independently, but also together.
Yeah.
And I love the phrase realistic optimism, because I swear, if my mom were here right now, she would tell you all day long that I am the least people person that you've ever met in your life, and I am a pessimist. And I've never tried to portray myself as an optimist. Yeah. What I always have said was that I'm a realist. I'm realistic. And so I love the realistic optimism. Yeah. I'm going to be using that in the future.
Please do. I think it's how we create steadiness as leaders, is realistic optimism. We're not pretending problems don't exist. We acknowledge the problems. We acknowledge how scary they are. We acknowledge our own fear. But the optimism to say, we're going to figure this out. Together, we've got this. Yeah. And that's the truth, right? You're not lying to people by saying that. I find when leaders can move in that direction in that way, it just creates a steadiness and a trust. Yeah. People go, okay, they see the problem and they're determined. We got this. Yeah. That becomes exciting.
When I was finance director, I used to say, of course, I would rather you always ask questions if you're not sure. I want you to always feel comfortable to come and have that conversation. Yeah. But I also love the drive and the ambition and the autonomy. And you know what? Debits and credits they'll save the world. So that's fine. Everything is fixable. I I don't necessarily use debits and credits save the world anymore as my phrase in city management.
Because outside of the finance department, everybody's like, hold on, I'm falling asleep.
What are you even saying right now? But the intent behind that is still very much there. Yeah. We may not know how to completely get from A to B, but we're going to figure it out.
Yeah, there's a curiosity and a creativity to that. Our previous guest, Lauren Rose, we hit on this idea that there's so much creativity in government. There's so much creativity in serving in local government, and we don't think there is. We were talking about, she said, she's not creative. I said, no, you're creative. Trust me. There's creativity everywhere.
No, there really is.
And you have to be that to find those solutions.
That's one of the best parts of our job, really. It's not the rigidness of this is the way that it is. These are the ordinances. This is what you can do and can't do. Yeah. This is building code. This is whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
It's very easy for us to fall back in the mundaneness of, well, that's what it says, so you can't do it. Sorry. Yeah. When instead, what makes it fun and creative is we know what can't happen. Yes. So let's figure out exactly what can happen and how can we get there? How can I help you get there?
Is this almost infinite field of possibility, but we just want to focus on, well, can't do this, and we get locked into that because it's easier. It relieves us. It's a story that relieves us of responsibility to go be creative.
Yeah. No, it does for sure. And I could bring that full circle about why the importance of having such a great team. I mean, honestly, a great council, a good leadership is so crucial.
Yes.
Because you don't want to be stuck in a situation where you're upholding ordinances from the 70s, because that's the way that it's always been.
Yes.
Being able to have those conversations and utilize that type of creativity to go, oh, well, is this now accomplishing what we want it to accomplish now here in 2024.
I love that.
So let's have that conversation. Let's do what we need to do to make sure that this is reflective of our community's needs.
Yep. So, I like that a lot.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
One of the things we're trying to do is start a movement towards sustainability and thriving for our teams. Mm-hmm. And so we're always trying to start the conversation of, what do we need to change? What do we need to rethink? And that's a very broad category of things, but I get different perspectives from everybody. And so I'm curious, what is something we need to rethink in public service to make it sustainable for our people, to where they can show up, thrive for 20 or 30 years, have a huge impact, and then retire? What does that sustainability require?
Definitely more spreadsheets.
The debits, the credits, they will save the world, right?
Yeah, they can. That was a joke, but spreadsheets are always welcome.
Sure. They'll be a part of the process.
They will be, especially if I'm involved in the process. There will be a spreadsheet or two on the back end. Man, you hit the nail on the head when you said that can be it is a very broad question. In order for us to sustain the public sector and public safety and city management and everything that comes with that, we cannot continue operating ourselves, leading our teams, running our cities the same way that we've been doing it for the last 100 years, 50 years, 10 years. The workforce itself, you could have a multi-series podcast
just about
show about that, or series of shows about that. But just in general, the workforce itself we're beyond saying it's changed. It has changed. Yeah. We are in a new era of what it means now and what it looks like now.
It's almost like it's over here and we're over here trying to play catch up.
And one of the most challenging things I personally think that our sector has experienced is that it's really difficult to find that balance of what the workforce wants to see now and how they are saying, this is how we're going to thrive and this is how we're going to give an amazing 20, 30 years of our service and dedication to you. And I think municipalities in general, it's a struggle to say, okay, we hear you and we want all your expertise and we want you to feel valued, but at the same time, we provide basic services and infrastructure. Yeah. And we provide public safety, and we have to have somewhere where people can come and pay their water bills. We have to have phones that are manned. We have to have secure places where people can come if they don't feel safe. We have to we provide services and amenities to the communities. We have to have parks and locations for kids to play, and we have to maintain those parks and do all kinds of, there's a lot of ambiguity, but there's a lot of difficulty truly, and figuring out how to make all of that work. And
because there is looking at we need all that, but then here's our resource bucket over here, which is, if we're honest about it, way smaller than what all those requirements need.
And if we were looking at the workforce 10 or 20 years ago, it was completely sufficient to say, okay, you're going to have a pension when you come here.
Yes.
And we're going to invest 2 to 1, and you're invested in5 years and all of these amazing, wonderful things that we all still do.
I say that was all it took. That was still a lot.
Oh, yeah,
but that was what it took.
But that message, that concept, those benefits are not necessarily what is propelling and driving the workforce now. That's not necessarily things that are as important to them. And it's not to say that they're not important. There's just other things that are as important.
Yes. There's other things that have been added to the list, quite frankly.
Yes. That weren't even a thought 20 years ago. Or maybe not. It's probably not fair to say they weren't a thought, but they definitely weren't mainstream or something that was prevalently offered.
Because now I think they're looking at the rest of the world and they're going, okay, what is the corporate sector offer? What does private offer for us?
Which has always been a struggle.
Yes.
For municipalities in general, but now it's even more so. And so the biggest thing I think that we can do to make sure that we are not only sustainable but successful going forward is to do our best to bridge that gap, to figure out what it is. How can we still meet the needs of the community and recognize that it doesn't have to be how it looked 5 years ago, 10 years, 20 years ago. We can maybe accomplish these same goals in a different way.
Yeah.
But how can we do that in a way that is speaking to our workforce, but also serving our community to the best of our ability and maybe even better than we always have before?
That's interesting.
And if we don't find a way to successfully do that, I think it will be a struggle.
Because it can't just be, hey, our employees want more because they can get it in the corporate sector, so we're just going to give more. Because that pool is finite. Like, there's only so much. The spreadsheet has an end to it, right? Literally. There's only so much we can do there. And so I think it's interesting of thinking, okay, to me it is, I'm not a math person at all. I'll be the first one to say that. But it is all an equation. Here is what is required service-wise. We might need to make adjustments there. Maybe it looks different than it used to.
And when you put in the complexities of maybe we can fund this or we can't fund this, but also we're fiduciaries of taxpayer money and we have to steward this responsibly.
Yes.
And do we really, is it best to put ourselves in a situation where maybe we stop offering this program or this service because we want to start doing XYZ instead? And you have to factor all of that in.
So thinking differently, here's an example. When I interviewed Chief Banks from Round Rock Police Department, they now have through, I think, the fire department, which being a cop he was reluctant to admit, but through the fire department, they now have this mental health unit that responds to a lot of calls that you would normally send a police officer to. So you're sending a police officer making X amount of dollars per hour in a $100,000 Tahoe to go respond to this call. Or you send people making a little bit less because they're not sworn officers in a $30,000 vehicle to go do it. Like, just
they're more relatable.
Exactly, they're more relatable. But it really, from a math perspective, we're now spending less money to go service the exact same call, and they're probably getting better care. They're getting someone that is truly trained in every aspect of how to deal with this situation. And I think that's an interesting example of, let's think of it differently.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the type of creativity that we need to foster and pay attention to. That is what's going to help us be successful and sustainable for the next 20, 50, 100 years.
I think that then frees up resources to say, okay, on the people side, I think it's fascinating that you look at it and go, okay, if here's a list of what you could get at a corporate job, we're never going to fill that list up. We can't do it all. What can we do? And what can we get creative with? And I think there has to be an understanding. I think people are going to hate that I'm about to say this. But the rest, so we're going to fill as much of that bucket as we can. The rest of the bucket is your heart for service. Yeah. The rest of that bucket is, are you dedicated to showing up and making people's lives better? Yeah.
That's a whole other full circle.
And nobody really wants to talk about that side, but that's part of it.
Is so important.
It really is. And I think maintaining the public servant's heart. I think we may have just hit a book I'm going to write. Because it's not just, I think it's one thing to have the heart, but to maintain it requires that healthy leadership. It requires the U's of the world, the Jay Stokes of the world, for the people below them to say, hey, we're going to make sure you get through this journey and you're thriving.
Yeah.
I think that matters deeply.
Just as important to making sure for us to be able to do that for them, we have to stop every now and then and do it for ourselves.
Not every now and then.
And that is
consistently.
Well, I was going to say that's something that not all city managers are very good at, and you just just called me out on that.
It's interesting when I'm with city managers and ACMs, really anybody in a CMO. It doesn't give away one of my little secrets here. I observe and I just watch the amount of times the phone gets picked up. And here's reality. There is a percentage of those times that is a genuine, I need to take care of this right now emergency. And there's a percentage of time it's not.
Yeah.
And I don't think that proportion is what we think it is. I think it is it is just not always an emergency.
Yeah, no, you're right, it's not. And we are, I think by far, and just in that this example and context alone, we are our own worst enemy. We are the hardest on ourselves.
Yeah.
We're way harder on ourselves than anybody else.
Yes.
I truly feel like I have the perfect example for that. I got married a few weeks ago. And
congratulations.
Thank you. But that day, I had an embarrassing amount of anxiety about not having my personal phone. That was no big deal.
Yeah.
And this is not in any way a reflection of my leadership or management. This is my animal.
Yeah.
But I had such horrible anxiety about putting it down and saying, okay, for the next 6 hours or 12 hours or the next 24 hours, I am offline. I'm out of pocket. If this is an actual emergency, call this number.
Yeah.
And that's just, in general, for what we do, that is so against the grain.
Yeah, it is. But that's one of those things I think we just hit on what we got to change to be sustainable. Because ultimately it does have to change. If you can't step away to get married.
They were very supportive.
With a message, and I'm sure they were. This is all internal.
Oh, yeah.
But with a message that says, hey, if it's a true emergency, call Jay. Don't even call my personal. Here's who you contact. Mm-hmm. If it's one of those situations where you can't do that free of anxiety, then there's something broken in that system. And I think some of it is the system itself. Some of it's expectations of others. It's a small percentage. Most of it's here.
Hands down.
And I think that's the thing that we wrestle with and that we've got to work on the most. And I think this is where I think I get a bad rap as the I don't believe in hard work guy. I believe in hard work.
I would disagree.
Because all I talk about is rest. But it's because it's the hardest thing for us to do. I'm a big fan of we're going to work intensely hard while we're working, and we're going to stop, and we're going to rest so that we can work intensely hard again the next week, right?
If you want me, and if we want our teams, if we want everyone that we work with and all of us, everyone that we surround ourselves with every day to give us 100% and for us to give them 100%, that requires rest.
Yeah.
And if we never do that, I would rather have one good 100% session from you than 10% sessions of you where it's taking a monumental amount of effort.
Yes.
Because your mental capacity or bandwidth or whatever it is may be is so compacted because you haven't taken the time to take care of yourself. And I am the world's worst.
And this is the thing is people will follow what you model, not what you say. Yeah. This is where the entire organization has to begin to value this and talk about it all the time. Yeah. Hey guys, how are we doing on this? And it's funny because I think you don't get to this level without being insanely driven. And I was talking the other day to somebody about the idea city managers don't need motivation. They don't need drive. They need a throttle. They've got too much drive. They just need some kind of gear to shift it down a little bit to say, okay, we're not going to burn this engine out.
I was thinking a NOS button, not to throttle down.
No,
but yeah,
y'all function with the NOS button always down. Like that's the thing, and that's
it seems that way. Yeah,
this is part of this movement towards sustainability. Some of it is going to be we got to rethink things to free up capital. We got to get things adjusted over here on what we give. Mm-hmm. The biggest adjustments are going to be internal with each leader. Yeah. That's going to be the hardest part.
And you were absolutely right when you said the most influential way, the most impactful way we're going to do that is leading by example. It's what we do. It's not what we say.
Yes.
And I will admit all day long I am the world's worst about doing that. And it so much so that at one point in my career I stopped responding to emails after hours or on the weekends because it didn't matter how much I said to my team. This is not an expectation I have of you. This is how my brain works. This is how I'm efficient. This is how I get things done.
Yes.
But this is in no way anything that I expect you to do.
Yeah.
It was still to them that was still an expectation of them.
Yes.
And it got to the point where I stopped doing that because
that's amazing.
it was
good for you.
It was a huge challenge.
It's hard. And probably there's
they
still
were all
times,
in my drafts. I just sent them the next morning.
There's probably still times occasionally you do accidentally send one.
I do,
right?
yeah. I do sometimes still.
It's not about perfection, but it's about saying, how are we going to function 90% of the time?
We have to recognize what it is that drives other people and what makes our team thrive, because that's we're there to serve the community and everything else, but we're also there to build up everybody that around us that works with us, and we cannot do that if we are not investing in them the same way, again, the way that they need to be.
To me, it's math. It's balancing an equation. If you are not thriving, your people will not thrive. It's impossible.
Sounds like a spreadsheet.
Sounds like a spreadsheet.
Just put a formula in there.
Listen, Sarah, this has been the best conversation. Good. Thank you so much for doing this.
Oh, my pleasure.
We're going to have Jay on at some point, and then after that, I think we're going to have the both of you on. I think that would be a fascinating
I think an hour
interview.
of just banter with me and Jay would be...
Actually, we'll just have the two of you do it. I'll just go sit over there.
We karaoke, I Want It That Way by the Backstreet Boys.
Okay.
That would be, I'm sure that would be entertaining for everybody.
I like that. I'm going to have John start researching the rights. If we can actually air that would be amazing. Thank you so much for doing this. I appreciate you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us for Leading Thriving Cities. You might also like our other podcast, The Leader Lab. You can find it on all the major podcast platforms and on YouTube. Just search for The Leader Lab. Each episode is under 10 minutes. It's just a quick thought to help you level up your leadership. You'll also find all the other leadership content we are putting out on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Just search for @ForwardPartner.